I'm here with Mr. Kindness, Michael Lloyd White. I've got that right.
Yes, you got that right.
And Michael, what's your title?
Well, I'm the chair and founder of World Kindness Australia, but I'm also the chief advisor to World Kindness USA. I also sit on the board of World Kindness China, but I'm the immediate past Secretary General to the World Kindness Movement. Now, this is not an association, it's not a club, but it's a platform for collaboration to bring people together on a foundation of kindness. So where a business can join, a school can join, a company can join, a not-for-profit can join, a community group, a sports club can join. Basically, it's open to everyone, even an individual. So I knew that I had a mission, and that mission was to be the nondescript Aussie that facilitates bringing this platform together in the US. So nobody owns the organisation. There is no founder. It's just been able to bring people together as founding members to create this platform, but they all represent different sectors of the community. They're not specifically from kindness organisations. They're not in the space, but yet they are in that space. Do you understand what I mean with that?
Yeah, so people that are not particularly in a non-for-profit organisation, maybe they're a business, and they're working towards creating this awareness.
Yeah, they share the values, and they haven't been given an opportunity previously to be involved. So what has happened is that there's been a shift in the last 2 years, and the pain of staying the same has become greater than the pain of change. So now there's more of an incentive for them to collaborate, put aside their fears, and to start to work together to bring about a positive outcome for their country. And the reason I see that the US is an important part is because it has, in our overarching strategic plan, we need to have the US on board. The very first thing we did was after London in 2012, when Australia got the mantle to run the world body, was we had to engage China. China had never been invited to participate in the global campaign. And I think, how can you change the world if you don't have 1.4 billion people involved? So fortunately at that time, Kevin Rudd was running for his second shot at being Prime Minister, or his third shot, I don't know. I forgot. He was in, he was out, he was in, and he wanted to stay in. So, and there was 13 weeks. And the reason why he was important was because I recognised he was the only Western world leader that spoke fluent Mandarin and had a strong presence. So during his election campaign, I did everything I could to harass him to be able to provide us with a message for the Chinese that we could deliver in China. And to his credit, not only did he give us a message, but he never took credit for it out of his own campaign time. So it doesn't matter which way you vote or whatever it is. I really acknowledge people for doing something that is basically selfless, because a politician could have leveraged that. And we presented that in China, and World Kindness China came about, and it was formed and applied to be a member of the movement. And that was the first thing we did. And then other countries followed suit, so we built up the membership and we created the national bodies to help manage the global plan and having cities involved. So we opened up the opportunity for cities not just to sign on board and give a token gesture, but more importantly to walk the talk and to meet KPIs, which are the kindness performance indicators. And the first city in the world to meet those KPIs was a city in Australia, and that just hosted the Commonwealth Games, the city of Gold Coast, and this was only recently. So that's a huge step, because what happens now, those KPIs very importantly include engagement, making sure the chambers of commerce are invited, making sure schools are invited, businesses are invited, and not-for-profits are invited, acknowledging the kindness in the community. It's great to have citizenship awards and everything else, but just simply adding the word kindness to the criteria to make people think about it. And I think you've really got to remember, when someone is acknowledged for doing these things, it's not for them, but more so for others, that they may be inspired or aspire to do the same. I remember I met with Bernie from Myers Group. He was the MD, and he said the Myers Foundation has been around for umpteen years and has done wonderful things, but it doesn't advertise what it's been doing. And I looked at him, I said, well, my train of thought on that is that you should.
I guess that's the challenge. You talk about acts of kindness and people not taking credit for it and making it, selfless. And then there's also the other token or the other side to be a leader in acting out in kindness and to be someone that shows the world that this is how we could be helping others.
It makes a big difference. When you've got the burden of responsibility in leadership, your actions are under the microscope and people are looking at you. I would like to say looking for inspiration, but media today is not looking for inspiration.
It's mainly on the bad news.
They're looking for the flaws. They're waiting for you to trip up, stumble, do something silly on camera or whatever it is. So the 24/7 news cycle is a tough master, as you can probably imagine. And I think that because of that, a lot of good people aren't stepping up. A lot of people feel that they've got something in the closet or they got this or they're afraid to do so. But kindness isn't about yesterday. You go to a UN summit, name a summit. You know what they do for the first half of the summit? They point fingers and blame. Everybody has an axe to grind. But we've been trying to work on them having a kindness summit for world leaders, where the agenda is how do we create a kinder world? Just to start that conversation and give them some ideas on some of the things that we could be doing in a collaborative process. Now, none of that would have anything to do with about yesterday. If I was focused on yesterday, would I be talking to USA or to China? Because depending on who you're talking to, the human rights, we can poke holes in everyone's history. And the reason why I say that is because there isn't a human being on this planet that is not flawed. So it's about not looking at where we fail, but where we can succeed, the opportunities to be better. And that's what I think we really need to be able to do. The other thing too is leadership is very temporary. You go into leadership role with aspirations, you want to achieve so much, you might get some stuff done. You might have a really good policy, a really good program, and then what happens? You leave, as you inevitably have to do. Somebody else steps into that role who might be from a different political persuasion or a different attitude or might not have even liked any of the things you did. But now they're in the seat and they start to implement new ideas, new policies, which mean yours will either be reviewed and ignored or rescinded. So if we rely on leadership, then we're always going to be coming backwards and forwards. We're not going to be moving forward. So strategically, we need to embed a culture of kindness at every level in every sector. And by doing that, we'll be influencing the leaders of tomorrow. So they won't have an issue if that sign that says, "Welcome to the city of Gold Coast, population 550,000, officially listed as a World Kindness City since 2017. They won't have an issue with that. And the idea about that is that, and this is a metaphor, but as the new leader, the new mayor drives into that town, the last thing that he'll want to see is that sign with a ladder leaning up against it and a guy in a pair of overalls with a paint scraper scraping off their listing. He does not want to be, or she, want to be known as the mayor that lost their international listing for kindness. So it's like a credit rating. And that's the beautiful thing about the World Kindness Movement. It's got an unblemished track record of 20 years. Started in Japan in '63. It was the first national campaign, and that was to deal with the forthcoming Olympics in '64. Because you've got to remember, this is post-war Japan. This is post-nuclear Japan, and who's coming to visit them? It's their enemies. So how are we going to do this? And a professor put forward that kindness could be a key element to reconciliation. And if you were a visitor from another world and you landed today and you looked at the relationships between different countries, and you looked at America, and you looked at Japan, or you looked at the West, you would never imagine in a million years that there were 2 nuclear bombs dropped. There were innocent civilians killed on both sides. There were tortures of POWs. That they could be such close of allies today. And if kindness had a part to play in that reconciliation, yes, there was trade, but there was also a whole bunch of things. And one of the main things that we had to do was remove fear and start to trust. And that's where kindness comes in, because that takes a certain amount of courage to be vulnerable. And I think courage, an act of courage, is selfless. And I think kindness is selfless. True kindness is selfless. And having just celebrated Anzac Day, I think there was a lot more kindness on the battlefield than people give it credit for. In the horror of war, there were things of tremendous courage that were going on. But it's not just about looking after your own. It's also about going to the aid of the enemy. And one of the oldest stories is actually from the Bible about the bridge and the Samaritan, the Good Samaritan, going to the aid of the enemy after they were ignored by a city official and by the church. This man lay dying. But knowing that if this Samaritan went over to help this dying man, a former enemy of the state, it would tarnish his personal brand, it would put him under the crosshairs of the establishment, but he did it anyway because he was compelled to do. Now, the religion's got nothing to do with that, but it's just a great example of what I think kindness is really about. It's about leaving your comfort zone. And we need to look at how people just get so comfortable, so focused on self. And often when I talk about if you want to be an agent for change, and everyone puts their hands up, yay. And now they're going to know my trick. But I then later ask them to stand up, as you do, and they've been sitting down for a long time. But I then ask them on the 3rd day of the conference to go and sit with somebody they don't know, or speak to somebody they've had least engagement with, to leave their seat. And you see and you feel the hesitation in the room. I'm comfortable. I like my new friend. I don't want to move. But I then say, okay, you don't have to move. Guess what most of them do? They sit back down. So you want to change the world, but you can't leave your comfort zone to change your seat. And this is what we get. We really have to find people that are prepared to take the path of most resistance. Maybe doing something they don't necessarily want to do, but we all know it's the right thing to do. And that's the message that we've got to get out there and clear up the messaging around kindness.